Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Gemma Creagh and I'm chatting with David Freyne, whose heartwarming comedy Dating Amber is being released on Amazon Prime on the 4th of June. So set in Ireland during the mid-1990s, two friends, Eddie and Amber, decide to stage a relationship in order to stop everyone speculating about their sexuality.
Thank you.
So you are based now in the UK.
So I moved to London about three years ago, and which is for a relationship, not work. And I've been back and forth all the time working on films. So we shot my first film, The Cured, back in Ireland, and then I went back to make Dating Amber as well. So I'm still kind of 100% an Irish filmmaker, just not always there.
The Cured was originally the third wave, wasn't it?
The Cured was originally the third wave, yeah. I have this unfortunate habit where all my films just end up getting retitled at some point.
Because Dating Amber was Beards?
Was Beards, yeah. I get to make the film I want, I just don't get the title I necessarily want. The Cured, there was another film called Fifth Wave that just came out a year or two before, and there was concern about confusion, so they changed that to The Cured, which I was okay with. And then I think there was a feeling with Beards that it may be a remote kind of term for some people, and so we settled on Dating Amber as a solution, which I really like and I'm happy with. But yeah, it wasn't the original title. It's kind of, I'm still getting used to it because it's a new thing.
It's nice, and it kind of leaves it more as a surprise when Beards is very much this is what it is.
Yeah, and I do remember when we were like, you know, when you were back in the days when you were pitching it to people, they were like, so it's about facial hair? Like, I don't get it. So I think if you don't know the term, you know, about to gay people who started faking a relationship, it's, you know, I guess it could be confusing. But anyway, that happens all the time with film, and it'll probably happen to me again. Fingers crossed I get there.
No. Yes, for the next feature. So
yeah, exactly.
The third wave was the third wave because you had done zombie films before, and you had done a short which was based on the same theme. So the third wave was, this was kind of after the fact, and it was post-apocalyptic. It was like almost kind of post-Cure, wasn't it? But it was in the same universe as your short.
Yeah, so the actually, you know, I wrote the feature film first for The Cured, and then when we were going into financing it, I think just the at the time, the logic was you make a proof of concept short film that you can go out to with film to financiers and kind of prove what you can do. So we then my producer and I went back and made the first wave as a proof of concept, just for the purpose of, you know, kind of garnering some faith in me as a director, and that worked really well. So yeah, so the feature came first and then the short, and you know, the feature, like it's a total 180 from Dating Amber. Like, it's, you know, it's a horror drama, it's bleak, and I think I wrote it over 10 years ago, and I was a very angry, depressed man at the time, you know, struggling with this inner demon. And I think now there's that thing of tragedy plus time equals comedy, and now with distance and with hindsight, I can see how warm and funny struggling with your sexuality was when you're a teenager, and I wanted to bring that to Dating Amber. So it's, you know, it's kind of the other side of the coin for The Cured in a bizarre way, and it's, you know, it's pretty autobiographical, and it's kind of seeing the fun side of being gay in rural Ireland.
in a repressed kind of right wing at the time country in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch it now for us, because, you know, we're coming off the back of the referendum, and everyone is you know, we're kind of like we're as a nation definitely going in the right direction when it comes to becoming more liberal and having more empathy and understanding things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, I mean, I think Ireland's made such incredible strides in the last few years, and, you know, I think it's made us all feel a great national pride. But what I found, so I wrote this as kind of set in the 90s, and it's kind of about me as a kid and growing up, and, you know, I thought it would be enjoyed as a nostalgia piece. But what I found really, really interesting and really kind of lovely was how much our young cast, some of them who were still in school, really related to the to the script, and they all had their own stories that were similar to this. And I think even though we have made these great kind of strides, it's still tricky to be queer as a kid. You're still kind of in a, living in a straight world with these expectations that aren't necessarily you. And I think people can still be insensitive and still make kind of crass jokes, particularly when you're not in some sort of metropolitan mecca. So, I think even though we've made incredible strides, I think there's still a way to go. And I think there can very often be an assumption that it's easier than it is for young kids now. I think it's still a tricky thing to come to terms with who you are when you've grown up, or people around you've grown up with a different perception. So it was nice to see how relevant it felt making it with our young cast, and hopefully it will continue to connect with the youth audience out there, as well as the kind of, people who just want a fun film or just want a bit of 90s nostalgia.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely to watch that. And I do think as well, there's a lot to relate to in it. It is about being in a place and feeling different, And I think maybe in some ways, people are a lot more enlightened, but there's always you're a young person, you feel like you don't fit in, you don't have your tribe.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing worse than being a teenager, gay or straight or what, trans or whatever. It's, it's a traumatic time. And it's a very confusing time. And I think it is that the film is all about finding, the joy of finding the person you can identify with and finding your tribe, as you said, and, and how life-changing that can be. And the film is about Eddie and this girl Amber, and how kind of they essentially form this incredible friendship and sort of in a way shape who the other person's going to be, and gives them the confidence to be who they need to be for the rest of their lives. So yeah, and I think, we all hopefully have that person in our past, or wish we had it.
So if there is, say, something deeply personal in there, do you find as a filmmaker going back and examining themes like that are cathartic? Do you get re-stressed a little bit? What was say the writing process like, and then the filming process?
Yeah, I think because of I think it's not something I could have written earlier, because I don't think I had the mental fortitude or kind of insight. I think I'm somebody who took a while to come to terms with with who I am and really deal with that. But when I did come to write it, it was lovely. It was really cathartic and fun and joyous. It was the most fun I've had writing anything. There was I think I was at a point where there was no fear in going to the places that were most uncomfortable, which was nice. And that kind of carried through to the making of it. I think our cast and crew were incredible, and I think everyone had a real passion for the project. It was one of those weird sets where everything went right. We always got our locations. We always got the weather we wanted. We had one day of rain, which was a day we had scripted rain, which is weird.
And so it was filmed in Spain, was it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It was so weird. It's kind of, because I always loved the idea that, when I was talking with Roy O'Brien, my DP, you wanted it to feel like you're looking back at old photos, and you always had your camera out in good weather back in the 90s and 80s and stuff. So we wanted that kind of feel to it, and we just ended up getting the weather to suit it, and we got to shoot it where I grew up, where it's set as well, which was a huge privilege. So in the Curragh barracks, which is an active military barracks, when they're very tricky to get access to film in, and we ended up just lobbying and working at it and getting it eventually, and I getting to shoot it where I grew up and shoot it where it's set and having my family around me when we were making it, it kind of became a really lovely kind of, it was like a year of therapy. It was just amazing.
Oh God, that's really good, because I do think as kind of creatives, we do tend to mine our own past for stories and to empathize with characters, and unfortunately, the most interesting thing to watch is kind of that trauma and working through it, and in the happy films you go through it and it has a happy ending. So it is nice to hear that as well. And I'd just be wondering, especially if things are so close to home, how it just feels like, kind of going through the same spots as a completely different person and almost kind of watching yourself go through it again.
Yeah, I mean, It is that thing of so I mean, it's kind of like it's semi-autobiographical, and I guess it's half truth and half wish fulfillment. And very often the really lovely things are things I wished had happened, or some of them did happen, and a lot of the really horrible, awkward things, like your mom finding like pornographic dick pics happened, and it's really interesting writing those scenes and then having your mother read those scenes and eventually watch those scenes. But it was fun. I think the film is such a light touch, and the actors were so incredible, and I think it's got a real warmth and comedy to it that I think it's easy to, when you're seeing it through that lens, and it's a lens that you don't often see queer stories through, it's easy to kind of digest it and take it in and not take things so seriously. I think it deals with the emotional stuff really well, and the actors are so brilliant. But ultimately for me, I wanted to make that funny, hopeful coming of age story that you just don't often see with gay leads, and you definitely don't see them with a gay and a lesbian lead. They're usually in these hermetically sealed boxes. They're never in the same film. So I wanted to make the film I wished I had as a kid, that was where there was nobody was dying of AIDS and nobody was getting persecuted or beaten up to the to an extreme extent, because that wasn't truthful to me. And I think while those films are really vital and really important to have, if that's the only time you see yourself on screen as a young queer person, you're going to have a very negative view of your future and a very kind of funneled view of your future. So it was like, again, I think the joy we wanted to bring to the script kind of ended up just coming into the production and the writing, and it all felt quite easy and effortless in a way, which was really nice. And again, that goes down to how amazing our cast and crew are. All my anxiety for this film was wrapped up in getting the right people for Eddie and Amber and everyone else. And once we kind of found them, like once we saw the chemistry read with Fiona and Lola, I knew we were set. I knew we would have something good, just because they're so magical. And I think that just, it is that thing of 90% of the job of directing is casting. And I think there's a huge truth in that.
And was it Louise Kiley?
Yeah, who's like phenomenal. I mean, she obviously just did Normal People. And, I think we're going to look back in a couple of years' time at all the big Irish actors, and they'll all just lead back to Louise. She's such an amazing talent for finding people and finding young talent, which is hard. I think one of the hardest pieces in the film to cast was the younger brother, who's hilarious. And she just found this local kid in Newbridge itself, where the film is set, called Evan O'Connor, who's such a scene stealer and so brilliant.
He's amazing.
And he's amazing. And that role wouldn't have worked. Like, I mean, you can write it as funnily as you want, but that role doesn't work if you don't have somebody who can deliver it with the wit and maturity that's required. And it could have been very uncomfortable and hit the ground like a lead balloon. And yeah, it's just because of his delivery that it works so well. And that's kind of down to Louise and her
and
team.
You deal, like, you're not afraid. Like, there's nothing, say, explicit there, but there's definitely overt displays of sexuality. Did you find, was there any pushback from that? Did you have to fight for certain scenes, or was it like they're very funny and it's very well done? I wouldn't have any issue myself.
No, there's lots of, I feel like I'm going to put on my CV that I'm really good at directing comedic hand jobs.
That was exactly the scene I was picturing in my mind in the cinema. Where I was like, just imagine maybe someone going, I don't know how that would play with the
No, I don't. It was, we developed it. My producer Rachel is amazing. She produced my last film as well, and it was developed with Dervla in Screen Ireland, and there was that was never a question. I think I always wanted to make sure there was, that they're not just gay in theory. It was explicitly sexual. And I think part of that is the awkwardness of sex, and part of that is the joy and love of it too. And I think there's, I think that comes through as well. And no, that was never an issue. I think that was always in the first draft, and so when you give that as the first piece and it's so central, I don't think anybody's going to push back against it. So I didn't sneak it in the third draft. It was always there. And I think the way the people I developed it with are all about just making sure we hone what the director wants to say rather than shaping it into something they think would be better or more marketable or whatever, which is the right way to develop a script. And so I feel, so no, that was, I think, I mean, now I'm like, maybe I should have put more sex in. Maybe I would have gotten away with it. You know? But yeah, no, I wanted...
Because like there's a really funny marketing campaign as well. Like, or somebody was tweeting something and it was just at the timing kind of being released around the same time as Normal People, and it's, you know, two young people exploring their sexuality in very different ways. But like, I just saw something online and I was like, actually, it's a very good time.
Yeah, it is, like, I mean, I think there's definitely... I feel very uncomfortable trying to piggyback off the extraordinary success of Normal People, which is obviously incredible, but I will. I will. But there's, I mean, you know, that's been such a phenomenal success, and obviously it's based on such an incredible book, and it's Lenny who's an icon, and it's, you know, Paul and Daisy are amazing in it. But yeah, I mean, that film is about first love, or that series is about first love, and, you know, the importance of first love. And so is ours. It's a different type of love. You know, it's a platonic in a way, and it's about the people who shape who you're going to be, you know, in the way Marianne and Connell do. And so I think there's a lot of similarities. I mean, we definitely don't have as hot sex as they have. We have a different type of sex entirely.
Yeah, it's very funny.
And I think... You know, it's a different, you know, I think I really identified with Normal People in many ways. What I didn't identify with was being really smart and really hot in school. That wasn't me, you know, and that's not a lot of people. I mean, I think it was in the first episode or second episode that one of his mates in school asks him for his French homework to copy. And I was like, that's my character. I'm the guy asking you to copy your French homework. Well, probably fancying the male French teacher. So I wanted to kind of, you know, in this Eddie, he specifically says, you know, that he's not the smartest. He's not going to necessarily get into college. And his only route, he thinks at the time in his youth, is joining the army like his dad. And I think that, you know, that's the reality for a lot of kids, where they don't necessarily see or have the options open to them. And I kind of wanted to show that. And you know, Amber's obviously really smart, but, you know, there's a huge teenage potential to her smartness, which I find really endearing and I love. And I think we were all pretentious teenagers, and there's and pretentious teenagers can turn into very smart adults. But I felt I wanted to kind of, you know, reflect me and my friends as kids, which were kind of in many ways the runts of the litter.
Oh no, definitely. I definitely would have fallen in with that crew. I'd be like more like the younger brother, you know, unsolicited weird advice.
Yeah, exactly.
You should do one of those quizzes for Facebook where it was like, which Dating Amber character are you?
Yeah, I know, exactly. And I love, like, I mean, because our cat, like, I really hope it does well enough that I can do a spin-off with them. There's the two girls, and Ian O'Reilly plays Kev, the bully in the school, who's really actually quite lovely. And Tracy and Janet in it. And there's such, again, it comes down to those actors being amazing and kind of just bringing a three-dimensionality to roles that could have been very one-dimensional.
I completely actually was going to bring that up about the bully character. There's such warmth to him, and at the end there's even moments where he's like, that's a bit far. Like, go on. Yeah, no, exactly. But I love that moment where he's all like, you need to be more sensitive, after spending an hour tormenting him. But it's like, it's that thing of, I think when you're a kid, a lot of the stuff that affects you, a lot of maybe the homophobic kind of jokes, people are like, don't realize the offense the harm they're causing. And A, that's because teenagers are idiots, and B, because sometimes people just don't understand. I think that's much more realistic than the really evil persecuting teenager who wants you to genuinely die, which they exist, but I just don't think they are everywhere. And I think the stuff that's more prevalent and actually in many ways more harmful is the stuff that isn't meant to be offensive. And I didn't want any of these characters to be irredeemable. I think in 10 years' time, Kev, the kind of insensitive bully, will probably be a very lovely, sensitive man, you know, in Dublin. And, you know, I think that's the truth. You know, or certainly it was for me in my school years. So I wanted to make sure they all had their
I don't know, inner lives, and they weren't just jerks, that they were, they're nice kids, really. And I think that goes back to the idea that Eddie and Amber are their own worst enemies in this film. It's about, I think, were Eddie to come out, I think, his family would love him and accept him. Everyone else would be fine. It's himself and his own kind of inner homophobia that's kind of holding him back.
But you did touch on, and I thought what was done very well, is the intergenerational trauma and teamed with toxic masculinity, and that's very prevalent with the relationship with the son and the father, and you can just see these kind of like negative, repetitive behaviors, and it's very, again, it's, there's no good guy, there's no bad guy. You empathize with that father. You just go like, he's again his own worst enemy, and it's passing down this trauma from generation to generation, which is very quintessentially Irish. Like there's things that we're only shirking off now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, again, look, that comes down to Barry Ward, who plays the dad. I think he's phenomenal. He's so funny and so emotional and heartbreaking and heartwarming. But I think it is that thing of, if there was any pushback from the script development processes, there was always this, maybe the dad should be more evil, or maybe he should be more kind of homophobic. And I was like, no, that's not the point. The point is that he's got his own trauma. He has his own kind of baggage from growing up with a strict father. And, and I didn't want any suggestion that he wouldn't love or accept his son, because he's a loving father, but he just doesn't necessarily know how to communicate with his son. And, and he doesn't really, he grew up in a time where being a man meant not being in touch with your feelings. And he is a really emotional man trying to battle his own kind of conflicting views of what a man should be. And again, this Barry is so brilliant in the film, but I just didn't want any of these kind of characters to be one note, and because I think that would be so cliched if it was just his dad's going to disown him. That's so, we've seen that film, and that film isn't, again, that film has to exist, and it does exist. That is the truth for some people, but for a lot of people that's not the truth. And I think a lot of very often there isn't one bad guy or a bad guy at all. It's there's lots of other issues at play. But yeah, I can gush about Barry Ward all day. I love that man.
I know that it's just a stunning cast, stunning chemistry. Can you tell me actually a little bit about the development process? Did it change much from, the initial treatment that you submitted, or?
Yeah, I don't think it did. I think it just gets funnier and you tune it along, and then I think I really like to do tweaks after you do read-throughs with actors and rehearsals, because you find out what's working for them, and when you hear it out loud, that really kind of informs what is actually funny. It's one of those interesting development processes. This could have been my first film in a different life. I remember we were really struggling to get The Cured off the ground, and we had financing that collapsed at several points, and it was a really difficult few years. And I think there was a point where we gave up on it, and I wrote this as a treatment and submitted it to Screen Ireland, being like, well, at the time Irish Film Board, thinking that, well, look, The Cure didn't happen, but I've proven I can write and they'll support me. And they rejected it at the time. I think the treatment was very similar to what we have on screen now. So then that was like a double whammy of, well, my career's over. First film didn't work. This film's not working. And then we put that aside, and eventually we got The Cure together on a more of a shoestring budget. And once The Cure was made, and we got it into Toronto for the premiere, I guess my feeling was I'm in a good stead right now with the Screen Ireland. So right now is the moment to resubmit this treatment, because I want it to be my second feature. And then thankfully they said yes then. And it was actually by the time they said yes, I already had the first draft written, and the first draft was really, really solid, I think, because I'd been living with it for so many years. So it wasn't like a rushed draft era. It was a very developed draft. And I think from there, we kind of got it together and financed within a year. And obviously I rewrote it along the way a little bit, but it never fundamentally changed. I think 2 weeks after I wrote the first draft, like 2 weeks after I gave the very first draft to my agent, I was sitting down with Sharon Horgan for coffee, for her, which is weird, like so weird. So it was, and it's not the way it's ever happened for me before, but I think this film just, there was so much time with the treatment and thinking about it and kind of living with it, that when it did come to writing it, I managed to write it a really good first draft that needed obviously changes and polishes, but it didn't need anything significant or structural. And so we were able to kind of just crew and cast and develop as we went. So it's from script to now what is, Amazon Prime screens, it was quite a short time, which is, wasn't the case with my first film, may not be the case for my next film. It could be an anomaly in my career, but it was a really nice one in that respect, that it just, I think I knew very much so the story I wanted to tell, and when I came to writing it, I had I developed a lot as a writer, and I was a better writer, and I was able to kind of bring more humor to it and everything. So,
and it's the film we really need right now as well, with everything that's going on. It's something upbeat with
But every night I'm with, like, me and my boyfriend, we're going to watch a film or something on TV, and I'm like, I want to watch a comedy. Where's the comedy? Nothing's funny. There's so few comedies out there, and it's kind of, and I love, like, I've been watching old comedies, like old Billy Wilders and old Preston Sturges, and it's like those old school, really tight, well crafted comedies are actually quite rare now.
And Irish people do it well. When we do it, we tend to do it well.
We do it really well.
I find we don't do enough of them, and I don't know why.
No.
But so that's why I was like, this is definitely...
I have my theories. I think one of the reasons is, unless you're a bigger budgeted film, very often, or A24 with like Lady Bird or something, very often when you're making your films to get into festivals, which is the only way to get an audience, and very often festivals skew towards more pensive, slow pieces, which isn't, like, some of them are great, don't get me wrong, but I think you're making things for what you think is an available audience, subconsciously, and I think when you make it, I think comedies don't necessarily get the dues that they deserve. They don't necessarily get the credit they deserve, in terms of festivals and awards and critically and everything. I think there's a lot of lazy depth that can be attributed to a 3-minute slow kettle shot. Like, it's just, and which kind of bugs me a little bit. But yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that we don't make it enough. We don't know if it's going to get out there or if it's going to get any kind of a claim or, which is a shame. That might be wrong, but that's kind of my current theory that I'm sticking to.
Yeah, I'm just wondering as well. So there is definitely tonally things that you want to write about. So you were saying that it comes from a different place. So you have horror, sort of thriller horror, which again it's all about kind of processing stuff, which is interesting, and you have this kind of lovely healing, but not afraid to deal with emotional issues, kind of comedy drama. Like it's a really good mixture to have, because it's all different facets of storytelling, and everything is storytelling. But do you feel like you pick up different skills, or do you feel like you veer from one to another? What would be your...
As a filmmaker, I just love anything narrative. So I think, like, I'm currently working on a TV project, and I'm working on another feature script, which is a revenge, but a dark comic revenge film. A few other things. So, I really am keen and excited to kind of explore TV, just because it was kind of my first love in terms of narrative stuff, and I kind of like the idea of kind of bringing characters over a long period of time. So I'd love to, I'm really excited to kind of get more opportunities in television. But in terms of a genre, I like I said, I love The Apartment. My other favorite films are Terminator 2, A Matter of Life and Death, which are, so different, and I think that, most people have really varied tastes and want to, as a filmmaker, you want to just explore different genres and different things. I don't know if I have the emotional intelligence to know exactly what the true theme is yet, but there's one somewhere.
Yeah, so it's kind of more character driven. Well, I suppose TV is more just character driven.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, character driven. I mean, it all starts with character, and I think there's a certain. I think it all depends on the story. I think some stories, the amount of times you watch a film go, a TV series going, don't make a series 2, that's perfect, and that could have been a film. And then the amount of times you watch a film going, there's so much more to tell. Why isn't this a TV series? So I think it all depends. I think the story you want to tell will dictate where it should fit. And then somebody will tell you no, and you have to do it the other way. Like The Cured started to be TV, and then it morphed into film. And Beard started as thinking it could be a TV series, and I very quickly realized it has a beginning, middle, and end. And no, this is a film. So I think you just let the characters dictate what it should be, and then money will tell you where it should be.
That's it. And that's ultimately decides the big things, doesn't it? I would definitely watch a sequel to Dating Amber. Like, I think the next stage would be interesting to see, because it's a whole different. It's about getting out of that one chapter, but I do think I would definitely watch
I would love to. I mean, I kind of don't like talking about sequels before films are out, because I've been burnt in the past because I had a whole sequel written for The Cured, and that's never going to happen. But I think yeah, I mean, I think the only big change that ever happened with this script was the very, very, very first draft of the script had a book ending where you had an older Eddie in London at about 30, and it was through kind of a bar. He sees this girl, or this woman that he kind of vaguely recognizes. Then you jump back to the past and you realize where he recognizes her from. And then at the very end of it, as they say goodbye in the film, you jump forward again where their eyes meet and they smile. And it didn't work because you kind of, there's so many things where you have to get actors that look like them that are older. Then you have to kind of have the audience, spend a film being engaged with these young actors, and suddenly you have to jump back to these old actors. And I just never felt like it would work in a book, but it wouldn't work on screen as a device. But I love the idea of, like, in 10 years' time, us coming together again and having these characters who maybe may have lost contact, but who were so important to each other in their past, just meeting up again in London and having some time together. So I love the idea of doing that, and I just love. I will do anything to work with Fiona and Lola again, because they're so incredible. But right now, I'm just really happy this is made and is going to get out there, and what will happen will happen. I'm already starting my campaign to do the spin-off series about Tracy and Janet, though. So I just think I just love them so. Like, Anastasia and Emma, who played the characters, are just so funny and so good, and they're actually so, like, they're such kind of talented, deep actors that I think they could go from really funny to really interesting places. So I'd love to do that at some point.
They were in my school. Not them, but I knew them from my school.
Yes.
Like, I know them from...
Yeah. I think we all know them. Yeah. And I think, again, they're the girl, like, they're girls that will probably grow up to be really lovely people, and they'll go through their own trials and traumas, and and I love the idea of seeing them move to Dublin in their early 20s, like working as hairdressers and temps and just kind of navigating the Celtic Tiger. And I just want to work with them because they were so much fun to work with, and they're such lovely people. But I mean, I think that's all me just kind of rambling and getting ahead of myself, because
going on your universe. No, but you've kind of created a very nice universe. So we'll just kind of go into the logistics of the shoot a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
So it was a 5-week shoot.
Yeah.
Did I read somewhere? Like, that's quite short, because it's...
I mean, it's short, but it's kind of the average now for Irish films, which independent films anyway, which they all are. No, yeah, it's short, but it's weird. So my first film was also 5 weeks, and it felt like we had no time, because you had stunts and you had action and, bigger set pieces. And so you were trying to do massive action sequences in the same day you're doing really emotional scenes. And that felt like the time we just were really chasing ourselves a lot. But with this, even though it was 5 weeks, it kind of felt like the right amount of time to make the film. I had an incredible team, like the most amazing team. Emma, our production designer, Rory, my DP, And I think just everyone had a really harmonized view of what we were doing. You know, there was a real communication between all the departments and how things should look, and everything just ran really smoothly, which was, you know, the actors were really well rehearsed, so they always got what they wanted kind of quickly, and then we could play around and try a few things, and I could throw in a few more lines. And so yeah, it felt like 5 weeks for this was, you know, I wouldn't give up any time, but it felt like we had enough time to do it, and do it well and still give it that scale and kind of cinematic feel. But again, it just comes down to the film. And, you know, I think we were so ambitious in trying to do The Cure on the budget we did it on, and in the schedule that we had. And I think it risked kind of breaking under the weight of that ambition a little bit, because I think we were just a bit naive. But with this, it just felt right. And I think we went into this knowing that this is a film we could do on a budget that we can get together quickly. And then I have scripts I have ready to go, but like one of them's like, well, this needs 10 million or there's no point doing it. This one can be done for 1.5 million. So that's, you know, I think it's just about trying to make sure you have the money and you have the time to tell the film you want to tell, because it's always a shame when when a film falls short because of those little production hiccups, which happens all the time. And I think there's feature films now being done in 4 weeks because of budgets, and some of them can be done well, but that's such a, you know, I think when things are getting trimmed down so much, and the production value, not because of the lack of talent, the talents are because of the lack of resources are becoming so small. Why would you go to the cinema to see that? Why wouldn't you just watch TV where they have a couple of million an episode and, you know, the same schedule to make an hour? So I think we just have to, you know, it's a really tough time for independent films and getting budgets together, but I think we just have to make sure that we're not undercutting ourselves. Like, I heard somebody recently talking about trying to do something in 3 weeks. I'm like, you're a nutter if you think you can do a feature film in 3 weeks. So yeah, I think going below 5 weeks I can't fathom it. And I think I would love to go back to the time where you had 6 or 7 weeks for a regular budgeted film like this, but I don't know if that's going to happen, particularly post-COVID.
No, and we'll see what happens as well with the restrictions. Like, a lot of people that are coming back now are coming back to, you know, do you have to be socially distant? The health and safety officer on set all the time. Like, that's going to be very expensive for a small production.
Yeah, I've talked briefly to some producers who are kind of trying to go through it at the moment with productions coming up, and it just seems it feels like it's going to be impossible for films of this scale, of like Dating Amber's scale, and to do that, and they're going to have some sort of production like budget boost from Screen Ireland or something to just for those additional things that are needed. And then how do you do intimacy scenes, or how do you make? I don't know. I'm really grateful that we finished when we finished, and I don't have an immediate production coming up, because it's going to be really tricky. I think if you have a very contained film with a small one location and a few actors, you can probably manage it. You can probably isolate for the period you need to shoot it, but yeah, we'll see. It's an interesting time.
And that's it, and bringing anybody in from places and having them self-isolate. Like, it just there is. And I was going to say, you were very lucky with your timing.
Yeah.
And then also, your platform is brilliant.
Yeah.
Because it is. I find, as someone who's scrolling through Amazon Prime, I do like it, but there's some great shows on there. But it's very like, I find myself scrolling through like super masculine terrorist fighting.
Yeah.
Middle class white guy.
Yeah. They have a lot of action.
Sad older middle class white guy gets dragged back into a career he's left behind, and I find myself clicking through them. So things like The Wonderful Mrs. Maisel, I go, they do it so well. So it's nice to have something that kind of stands out a little bit within their programming.
No, I think that's right, and I think getting released in June with Pride Month, and obviously there's been all these Pride events have been cancelled. I think that's also really fortuitous for us. But yeah, I mean, I think anything that's comedic is going to jump out on those platforms at the moment. They don't, they obviously have a queer library, but with their Amazon Prime originals, it doesn't feel like there's a huge amount at the moment for queer stuff. It is
or women.
yeah.
Like there's stuff that they do have some good stuff for women, but it's definitely in the minority. But
I don't know if that's I'm actually, because I wonder, because if you look at them, like if you look, they have Jack Ryan and all that stuff, and
Goliath and
I wonder, have they been reacting to the market of the people that they have been buying subscriptions so far, or
maybe
and they need to do much more to get in female subscribers and queer subscribers. I don't know, and I'm definitely not gonna bitch about the hand that feeds.
Yeah, I
know. but I think you're right. I think there isn't enough queer films, full stop. There isn't enough queer films on these platforms, and there's definitely not enough queer films that are also just universally funny on any of these platforms. So yeah, I mean, hopefully we do kind of jump out from the crowd on there and get some laughs. And I think, the fact that Catastrophe is on their site and that's been such a success for them, the Sharon connection's great. So I don't know how these algorithms work, but we're really excited. I think we have a nice opportunity now when people are watching way more than they should be and they need a laugh. I think we could
captive audience, something
captive
kind of
audience,
nourishing, something with a bit of humor to it.
We are really excited. I think it's gonna really. I think it will connect with people and go down well. I hope. I mean, if anything, they're gonna love Fiona and Lola because they're just superstars
and they're brilliant. And they it's very enjoyable. It kind of goes to some surprising emotional depths with some areas, which I think it's just lovely to watch as well. They just do it so well, and couldn't recommend it more.
Thank you
so much for chatting with us.
Thank you, Tim. That's great. Really enjoyed it.